written some things to say, but some of the comments that other people have said really resonate. And one of them was, what are your greatest moments in sailing, or the things you like the most? And I'm here to induct Terry Neilson, and he has to be one of the highlights of coming to the sailing. Really a pleasure to hang out with Terry, if any of you have ever done that. So you just give me a second here. If someone was to write a book of Terry stories, suffice it to say, it would be very entertaining. However, no one would believe it. I can't tell you some of the situations that Terry gets himself into, and somehow he just keeps landing on his feet. Terry has a great sense of humor, and over the years that we competed against each other, we had a lot of fun, as well as heated competition. This is all before computers, etc., so we made our own entertainment. In this department, Terry was the leader of the pack. Terry always would have something going on that would consume our attention and be a lot of fun. Fireworks, hang gliders, going to local attractions like Six Flags. Going out for anything with Terry was always an adventure. You never knew what might happen. All these adventures formed great and lifelong friendships. I'm resisting telling some of the many Terry stories, but I'll relate one of them that typifies Terry. We were racing at Kiel Week, and we had our World Championship in Gromitz, Germany, about 100 kilometers east of Kiel, and we had to get our boats there. And we borrowed a vehicle from Wolfgang Goertz, who is a German sailor. So we just finished loading our boats from the car that we borrowed, and I'm looking around, I look at Terry, and he has this oh shit look on his face. And if you know Terry, it's kind of, you know, like this. What happened? I asked him, what's the matter? And without saying a word, he holds up the car keys. And I'm still confused. What's the matter? Well, Terry had broken the key off in the trunk lock. It was the same key for the ignition. So we weren't quite sure what to do. And somehow we managed to pick the broken piece of the key out of the trunk lock. We thought, maybe it'll work if we push it into the ignition and stick the other half of the broken in and try to turn it. That didn't work. So don't try that. So we had now we had a day to kill, or a night to kill, because there's nothing we could do about the car until the next morning, where we could get a locksmith and fix it. So so what should we do now? Well, I say Kiel, but we're actually in Schilksee, which is north of Kiel. So we decided, well, let's go to Kiel. And let's go to Kiel. So we got in a taxi, planning to take advantage of the brief break from our duties. On the way, we chatted with the driver, who was from Poland, and we told him what had happened. And we asked him about hotels, etc. But if you know what Kiel Week is all about, there's not much room in the hotels. Everybody's there, it's packed. So the taxi driver said, no problem, you can stay at my place. So we wanted to get something to eat and have a drink or two, and so the taxi driver took us to a nightclub and gave us his phone number and said, call me when you're ready to leave. So after dancing with Terry all night, we called our new Polish friend, and we went and stayed at his place. The next morning, he helped us solve our key problem, and we were off to Gromitz. As usual, everything worked out for Terry in the end. That's one of the amazing things about him. Things always worked out in the end. He's one of those guys who could fall off the roof of a building and he'd land on a pile of mattresses. Our time in Gromitz is another story, and it'll for sure be in Terry's book of adventures. Back in the day before the Finn, we raced lasers, which at the time wasn't an Olympic class. But we traveled across the country and internationally. We didn't have any funding. We did it because we loved the sport and we wanted to see how far we could go and how well we could do. Terry won the Laser European Championship in 1979 and then won the Laser World Championship in 1982 in Sardinia, Italy. At the end of that Worlds, another Canadian, Andy Roy, was second. The Finn class in Canada got a big boost from the 1976 Olympics that was held here in Kingston. At that time, the Finn was supplied at the Games, and Shell Oil bought 50 boats for the Games. After it was over, the boats were divvied up among the provinces with the exception of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland. Me being from Alberta, I had to write a letter to CYA and get one of those boats, and it was the last one available. So this was the start of Canadian dominance in the Finn class. I was the first to get the new. I was first of that new generation. I finished 5th at the '78 Finn Gold Cup and then 3rd at the 1980 Gold Cup. Unfortunately, we boycotted the 1980 Olympics because Russia invaded Afghanistan, as we all know. Then it was Terry. Then it's when Terry came into the picture. In 1984, he placed 2nd at the Finn Gold Cup in Anzio, Italy, and of course, Terry won a bronze medal at the Olympics that same year. And to continue the legacy of the Finn class in Canada, next came Gordie Anderson from Halifax, and he finished 3rd at the 1988 Worlds in Brazil. Hank Lammons won 2 Gold Cups, 2 World Championships, 1990, 1991. And at the 1990 Gold Cup, which Hank won, I was 2nd by 3/10 of a point, and Mike Milner was 5th. So Canada had 1, 2, and 5 at the World Championship. I don't think that's ever happened in the Finn class, that's for sure. Then came Richard Clark, who was 3rd in 1993 at the Worlds, and Chris Cook, who was 3rd in 2005 at the Worlds in Moscow. So the Finn class has a great legacy, and it's hopefully still well, it can't continue now. It's out of the Olympics, unfortunately. One thing every one of the guys I've mentioned had in common was dedication and perseverance and talent. But there's one factor that was most important that separates the men from the boys, and that's toughness. It's not how fit you are, but how tough you are. Sailing a Finn or a laser is painful. No matter how fit you are, it still hurts. This is why Terry succeeded in both laser and Finn. He was tough, both mentally and physically. This is the intangible ingredient that every successful athlete has. So without further ado, it's a great honor for me, on behalf of the Marine Museum of the Great Lakes at Kingston and Sail Canada, to be inducting Terry into the Sailing Hall of Fame. Here you go, buddy. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. I've got a short little speech here, nothing too long. First, want to thank Robert Mazza for doing a great job and the many, many emails and the difficulty with COVID. Thanks very much. And you know what, a lot of us came from different areas as far as the sport of sailing. Terry was born from two high caliber sailors. I was got started in sailing because my parents were looking for a cheap place for the summer to get rid of me. And it was National Yacht Club. You could get rid of the kid for $75 for the whole summer. So I got put in there and got yelled at all summer by an amazing lady by the name of Louise Gardner. And she was, I guess, my age at the time, but she seemed like about 95. And she would walk around with a loud hailer and just scream at us, rig the boats, get the boats in the water. But she was actually a good sailor. She would run races every day. We had about, I don't know, a dozen albacores, sometimes 4 or 5 kids stuck in an albacore with the big life jackets on. So that was my introduction to sailing. But yeah, it was just racing, 5, 6 races every day, and it was a good way to start. After that, we were very fortunate, and still are, with the Ontario Sailing Association, that I think the first time I started racing was the 13 and under championships. Some of the people here must remember that. We go out and I think most of the races were in Toronto Harbour. Then it was 16 and under, and then it was the youth championships. And I think without that introduction, and then we would race albacores on the weekends. And it was just repetition, 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 and slowly you kind of figure out what's going on. And then I guess we started getting the laser At around 16 or so, I remember meeting two of my best friends on the Western Gap. I was going into the harbor, and Dirk Nolan and Rob Maru were sailing on the way out. We got together, and they were training, and so I hooked up with them, and then we started training. Weekends, weeknights, and I think that the international sailing is great, but the reason we got, I think, to a certain level, racing against Larry and the Laser and Andy Roy and some of the top people in Canada, was just out of water rats, where a lot of us learned how to sail. And it was just repetition. You put your 10,000 hours in, and eventually you get somewhere. So I think a lot of us ended up at the same place, but through different means. So again, I got to mention Bill Goodrum back then and Alf Jenkins. The weekends and the nights and the thousands of meetings they would have gone to promote the sport. Those are some of the unsung heroes that I remember that really made a difference. The other thing I just want to mention is that the reason I was able to get to the level, like a lot of people in this room, is because of training. And we all know training isn't that much fun normally, but I got to hang out with Larry, with Andy Roy, and a bunch of fun people. And the competition training was the most important, but a close second was having fun. And I think if it wasn't for the fun, I don't think we would have trained so hard. And so we had just great times going to regattas to see all your friends. Lots of European friends that I try to keep in touch with. One of the best training partners I ever had was Lasse Hjortnes from Denmark, who won, I think, 3 Finn Gold Cups. So part of the reason, at least for me, as a single-handed sailor, Laser and Finn, got to that level is because of those training partners. Because if you don't get along with other people in the Finn or Laser, you're going to be sitting by yourself in a restaurant every night alone. You don't have the advantage of a 2-person crew or a soling or something. So I think we all got together. I trained with Larry a lot and Lasse and the Finn. In the Laser Worlds in '82, we did well. I was fortunate to come first. Andy Roy was second, and that's because the two of us trained in Australia for like 5 months before the Worlds, every day for 6 hours. And if it wasn't for him, there's no chance I would have won those Worlds. And same thing in the Finn. If it wasn't for Larry being as competitive he was and being such a high caliber sailor, it wasn't so much at the Olympics trying to do well. That was important, but it was trying to beat Larry in the trials was the hardest thing. So I was fortunate that some of the best sailors I had to compete against to get to that level. So I guess with a lot of us, we got a lot of people to thank, and I think that we're fortunate with Sport Can, a lot of the organization. I know it's tougher now. I think the competition, it's much tougher. Everybody has to have a coach. It's much more expensive. I hope they have some fun. From what I hear is they don't typically go to the bar after every race like perhaps we used to. But you know what? It's still a great sport, and I've been very lucky. So thanks so much again for giving me this honor and among the people here in the room. Thank you.